For a Cherokee living in the early 19th century, it was a time of very complex changes in their culture and in their society. It was sometimes called the Cherokee Renaissance because there was so much fast, rapid change going on in their life. While the Cherokee were still trying to adhere and hold on to a lot of their older traditions, they were also adopting and being introduced to a lot of new technology. Some of the older technology the Cherokee still depended on and still were trying to hold on to were things like river cane use. Throughout the valleys of the southern Appalachians, the river cane was a very important plant for the southeastern Indians. They used it for a variety of items, including river cane blowguns, like we see here, with darts they could use for small animal hunting. They used it for their baskets, which even in the early 19th century of New Echota's time period were collector items as they are today. Beautiful basketry work was usually patterns handed down within a family. It was also used for flutes, for musical instruments. We have records of southeastern explorers coming into the southeast and being greeted by the Native Americans playing their different types of reed flutes. Cherokee women were known for their pottery, and at this time period you would have had a good mixture of what was going on for their cooking utensils. Pottery was still being used by the Cherokee that they made themselves. Right beside it in the same household you would quite often have trade goods that had been coming from New England or from overseas, metal cookware, furnishings that the Cherokee themselves had learned from the southern Appalachians over the years. And so you would have had a lot of this stuff being found today in archaeological sites that were at the same time period very traditional and old looking, but right beside it would have been some of the newer technology. You can imagine if you were a Cherokee in the 1820s, you wanted to acquire what you could afford that made your life easier, made it more comfortable, but you also wanted to hold on to a lot of those old traditions. Other traditional things going on with the Cherokee were things like the stickball game. Being used for generations, the stickball game was more than just a sport. It was a ceremony. It was a lot of ritual involved with it. Communities would often play against each other. The Cherokee name, Anetsi, meant little war or little brother to war. It was a very violent and physical game where sometimes neighboring towns would play against each other to help settle disputes for the Cherokee in the early days. Combined with all this older traditional item the Cherokees would have had in their family, you would have had a good blend of 20th century items. Things like the furniture you can see inside this cabin. The Cherokee had learned traditional wood crafts, log building of houses. They had sawmills, and so in many ways the structures they lived in would have been very similar to what a Georgia settler would have had on the frontier. Instead of hunting with the blowguns and the traps of the earlier days, the Cherokees had become dependent on trade goods like muskets you can see inside the cabin here. The furnishings of the beds, the spinning wheels, all were changing their culture and also changing gender responsibilities. For a long time, houses were the realm of the female in the Cherokee culture. You had the clans who were dominant over the household and the farm. So one of the things you would have found sometimes in a Cherokee cabin at this time period, and especially earlier years, would have been one of the traditional tribal masks that was affiliated with your clans. Your tribal clan came from your mother's side of the family, so when a couple was married, the kids were raised in the clan of the mother as a matrilineal clan. So if you married into the Paint clan from the mother's side, you were associated with her clan, not with the father's side. Because of that, the nearest male relative, the wife's brother, the kid's uncle, often played a very important role in the raising and the teaching of the kid of what it meant to be a Cherokee person. You would have had furnishings that had been handed down from your ancestors to yourself and your siblings. And you also have to remember that a lot of times we're talking about the Cherokee and how they were living in two worlds almost at this time period. Very much so they're doing that today, because the Cherokee today are trying to live in the 21st century as citizens of the United States, but they're also still trying to hold on to their language and to a lot of the other parts of their older culture that they had. So I think it's good that we don't speak of the Cherokee or the Muskogee Creek or other tribal peoples as were all the time, because they are still today a very big part of our society.